The first time I saw her, I thought my eyes were tricks on me. It was a Saturday morning in early spring. The air still carried that crisp bite that made you pull your sweater a little tighter. I was unloading groceries from my car when a moving truck pulled up next door. A girl stepped out, tall, graceful, with long dark hair that caught the sunlight. But it wasn't just her beauty that froze me in place. It was her face. Something about it slammed into me like a forgotten dream. The curve of her cheekbones, the way her lips pressed together when she focused, even the faint birthmark just under her right ear. A tiny crescent moon. I knew that mark. I had seen it once before. On the newborn I was told had died in my arms 22 years ago. My throat tightened. I had no reason to remember it so clearly, but I did. That night had been a blur of blood, pain, and grief. They told me she hadn't survived, and I believed them because I was 19, alone, and terrified. I buried my daughter in my heart the moment they wheeled me out of the hospital room. And now she was standing 20 feet away, laughing with the man who was clearly her father, or at least the man who raised her. I must have been staring, because she glanced over. Our eyes met for the first time, and my stomach dropped. Her smile was warm, polite, but her gaze lingered like she was trying to place me too. I managed a small wave. She returned it before going back to carrying boxes. The rest of the morning passed in a haze. I kept catching glimpses of her, lifting a lamp, hugging a woman who must have been her mother, tossing her hair over her shoulder as she laughed. Every movement was a cruel reminder of something I'd never gotten to have. Watching her grow up, hearing her first words, knowing her favorite color. By the time I closed my front door, my hands were shaking. I pressed my back against the wood and slid down until I was sitting on the floor. It couldn't be her. It made no sense. But the more I tried to dismiss it, the more certain I became. That birthmark. That face. It was her. And if she was alive, then someone had lied to me. The question was, who? That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed listening to the faint hum of a TV next door, imagining her just on the other side of the wall, existing in a life I was never allowed to be part of. By sunrise, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to ignore this. I was going to find out the truth, even if it destroyed me. But first, I had to figure out how to speak to her without revealing who I was. The next morning, I stood at my kitchen counter, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I'd barely touched. Through the window above the sink, I could see their driveway. The moving truck was gone. Their porch now had a potted plant and a welcome mat that read "Home is where the heart is." I watched her step outside, tugging on a hoodie over her pajama top, hair messy in the way only young people could pull off and still look perfect. She carried a small trash bag to the curb. This was my chance. I didn't want to seem obvious, so I grabbed my own garbage bag and stepped out at the same time, pretending it was coincidence. The air was still cool, the street quiet except for the distant sound of a lawn mower. "Hey there," I called lightly. She turned, smiled, and for a moment my chest ached so hard I thought I might not be able to speak. "Hi," she said, her voice soft but bright. "You must be new here," I said, walking toward the curb. "I'm Claire. I live next door." "Nice to meet you, Claire." She shifted the bag in her hand. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, Lena. Lena. The name I'd written over and over in an old notebook when I was a teenager, before everything went wrong. I'd planned to name her Lena. The name was like a knife wrapped in silk, cutting me while pretending to be soft. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said, forcing a smile. "How's the move going?" She shrugged, that little shoulder roll I'd done my whole life. "It's a lot, but it's nice here." "Different? Different good or different bad?" I asked. Her smile widened. "Good, I think." She glanced toward her house. "My parents seem to like it." Parents. Plural. Both alive. Both standing between me and any truth I might find. I wanted to ask her everything, where she grew up, what she liked, what her dreams were, but I knew I had to be careful. Too much too soon would send her running. "Well, if you ever need anything, I'm right next door," I said. "Seriously. Sugar, tools, even just company." She nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thanks, Claire. I might take you up on that." We stood there for a moment, the silence thick but not uncomfortable. She looked at me with a faint, curious tilt of her head, like she was trying to figure me out. And then she said something that made my skin prickle. "You look familiar. Have we met before?" I laughed softly, a little too quickly. "I don't think so." But maybe I just have one of those faces. Her eyes lingered on me a beat longer before she smiled again and walked back toward her porch. I watched her go, my pulse thudding in my ears. If she was already sensing something, I had to move faster. Because if her parents suspected me first, they might take her away again. By the end of that week, I knew her school, her job, and the name of the coffee shop where she liked to spend her afternoons. Not because I followed her, at least not at first, but because I listened. Our houses were close enough that when her windows were open, I could hear snippets of her life. A phone call with a friend about an art class she wanted to take, her mother asking her to be home for dinner, the sound of music drifting from her bedroom. Every detail was another stitch in the quilt of the life I'd missed. It didn't feel like spying. It felt like catching up on the years that were stolen from me. Still, I needed more than scraps. I needed facts. On Saturday, I found an excuse to stop by while her parents were in the driveway unloading groceries. The man, Tom, was friendly, quick to shake my hand and talk about the neighborhood. His wife, Diane, was polite but guarded. There was something in the way she looked at me, a flicker of recognition she tried to mask. We stood there talking about mundane things, trash pickup schedules, the best bakery in town, but I could feel an undercurrent. Like we were both pretending this was the first time we'd stood face to face. That night, I pulled out an old box from the back of my closet. Inside were the few mementos I'd kept from my pregnancy: a faded hospital bracelet with my name, a sonogram photo, and a single sheet of paper with the word stillborn written in cold black ink. I stared at it for a long time. If Lena was alive, then this paper was a lie. And someone had gone to great lengths to make me believe it. The next day, I drove to the county records office. The birth records desk smelled faintly of coffee and paper dust. I handed the clerk the slip of paper with the name Lena and the year she would have been born, praying I'd get something, anything. She tapped on her keyboard, her expression neutral. After a moment, she shook her head. No birth record for that name in this county for that year. I tried a different approach. What about under Claire Matthews as the mother? Hospital records from 2001. She searched again, then frowned. We don't have maternal records here. You'd need the hospital archives for that. The hospital. The same place where they told me she died. I left with my heart pounding, the edges of the paper digging into my palm. The more I pulled at the thread, the more I was certain. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had erased her. That night, I stood at my window, the lights in Lena's room glowing softly through her curtains. She was sitting on her bed, sketching something in a notebook, her head bent in concentration. And then Diane entered the room, sat on the edge of the bed, and placed her hand over the notebook. Lena looked up, startled. They talked for a moment, too quiet for me to hear. But the way Diane's eyes flicked toward my house. She knew. And if she knew, she might be planning something. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about that look Diane gave my house. It wasn't casual. It was sharp, measured, like she was assessing a threat. And I was. Every time I saw her, she smiled too brightly, her eyes staying cold. When Lena wasn't around, she barely acknowledged me at all. But when Lena was nearby, she'd wave, comment on the weather, make small talk loud enough for her daughter to hear. It was a performance, and I was her unwilling co-star. One afternoon, I saw Lena in her driveway, loading art supplies into her car. I stepped outside, trying to keep my voice light. Starting a new project? Her face lit up. Yeah, I'm taking a class at the community center. Just something for fun. Before I could respond, Diane appeared in the doorway. Lena, we're running late, she said, her tone clipped. Lena gave me a quick smile. I'll see you later. She slid into the car, and Diane didn't even glance at me before closing her own door. The car pulled away, leaving the air strangely still. That night, I decided to dig deeper. I waited until after midnight, when the lights in their house went dark. From my kitchen window, I could see their backyard. It was neat, too neat. But near the back fence, there was an old storage shed. I crossed over quietly, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure it would give me away. The grass was damp under my shoes, the air smelling faintly of rain. The shed's door was locked, but the window wasn't. I slid it open and shined my phone's light inside. Boxes. Dozens of them, stacked to the ceiling. Most were labeled with normal things, Christmas kitchen books. But one box caught my eye. It had a single word written in thick black marker, Lena. I felt the air catch in my throat. The box was taped shut, but I could see through a gap at the top, baby clothes, tiny shoes, a faded hospital blanket. My hospital blanket. I knew it instantly, because I'd spent hours crocheting it while I was pregnant. Pale yellow yarn, uneven stitches from my clumsy beginner hands. I reached in through the gap, my fingers brushing the soft fabric, when a sudden beam of light flooded the shed. "Can I help you?" Diane's voice was low, almost calm, but the way she gripped the flashlight, the way her knuckles whitened, told me otherwise. I froze, the blanket still between my fingers. Her eyes followed my hand, and her expression hardened into something cold and unrecognizable. "You shouldn't be here, Claire," she said. "Some doors should stay shut." I didn't sleep that night. Even after I slipped back into my house and locked the door, my mind wouldn't stop replaying the way. Diane's voice wrapped around those words. Some doors should stay shut. It wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. The next morning, I found a note in my mailbox. No envelope, just a folded scrap of paper. "Stay away from my family." No signature. No explanation. Just block letters pressed so hard into the page I could feel the grooves in the paper. I knew it was from her. The same thing would have been to back off. To protect myself, to let the past stay buried. But sanity had left the moment I saw Lena step out of that moving truck. Later that day, I caught Lena outside, rinsing paintbrushes with a hose. She smiled when she saw me, but it was smaller this time. More cautious. "Hey," I said, walking over. "How's the art class going?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "It's good. But can I ask you something?" My pulse quickened. "Of course." She glanced toward her house, then back at me. "My mom keeps telling me not to bother you. She says you like your privacy." I forced a light laugh. "That's not true. I enjoy company." "Yeah, I thought so." She bit her lip. "It's just she's been weird since we moved here. Jumpy. Jumpy." That was an understatement. I wanted to tell her everything. That I had held her in my arms once, that I had been told she was gone, that the blanket in that shed was mine. But the words caught in my throat. If I rushed this, Diane could poison her against me before I had a chance. Instead, I asked, "Has she ever told you much about when you were born?" She frowned. "Not really. Just that they adopted me as a baby. I don't know much else. They don't like talking about it." My chest tightened. Adopted. That was the first confirmation I'd gotten that lined up with my suspicion. Before I could press further, Diane's voice called sharply from the porch. "Lena." Lena winced. "I should go. See you later." "Of course," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my stomach knotted. I watched her walk away, her shoulders tensing as she stepped past her mother. Diane's eyes met mine across the lawn, and for a moment, we stood there locked in silent battle. Then she smiled, a thin, venomous curve of her lips, before turning inside. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the crocheted blanket I'd stolen from the box in the shed. I didn't care if Diane knew I had it. Because tomorrow, I was going to tell Lena the truth. But I had no idea that by then someone else would get to her first. The next morning, I rehearsed the words over and over. "I'm your mother. They lied to us both." But when I finally stepped outside, Lena wasn't in her driveway, her car was gone, and her parents' curtains were drawn. By noon, worry had begun to gnaw at me. I called the community center pretending to be her aunt. They told me her art class had been canceled that day. She wasn't there. Just as panic began to take root, I saw her car pull into the driveway. She got out slowly, her face pale, eyes rimmed red. Her movements were deliberate, like each step was heavy. I walked toward her, but she didn't smile this time. She didn't even meet my eyes. "Lena, are you okay?" I asked, my voice gentle. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "I had coffee with someone today." My stomach tightened. "Who?" She swallowed hard. "A woman. She said she knew things about me, about when I was a baby." Cold rushed through my veins. "What did she tell you?" Lena's gaze sharpened, searching my face. "She said my birth mother was dangerous. That she tried to take me from the hospital. That she was unstable." My heart dropped. "That's not true," I said quickly, maybe too quickly. "Who told you that?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "My mom." Of course. Diane had gotten to her first. I stepped closer. "Lena, please. They lied to you. They lied to me. You weren't stillborn." I hesitated, the word trembling on my tongue. "I'm your mother." Her eyes widened, not in recognition but in confusion. "You can't just say that." "I can prove it," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the crocheted blanket. I made this for you. You had it when she shook her head. My mom said you'd try something like this. She told me you've been watching me, going through our things. That's because I stopped, realizing how it sounded. Lena, they took you from me. They told me you died. I've been searching for you for 22 years. Her breathing quickened, her eyes darting toward the front door. I can't. I need to go. Please, I begged. Just give me a chance. The door opened and Diane stepped out. She slid an arm around Lena's shoulders, pulling her close. That's enough, Diane said, her voice low but razor-sharp. If you come near her again, I'll make sure you regret it. Lena glanced at me one last time, her expression torn, caught between doubt and the comfort of the only family she'd ever known. Then the door closed behind them. I stood there in the quiet, the blanket clutched in my hands, my heart pounding with a new, terrible certainty. I hadn't lost her once. I was losing her all over again. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you.